Bowman says that Kyle Busch apologized to him for his harsh comments over the radio. Ben Kennedy says that the 2023 Cup Series schedule will most likely be sometime this summer, and it looks like that there will be a double yellow line rule for Atlanta Motor Speedway. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories set here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. First paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joe Graf Jr.'s 2022 Bucked Up Energy scheme that we're received this weekend at Phoenix. Now, we've already seen another Bucked Up Energy scheme for Daytona, but they decided to change it up, and it's like a yellow color. I actually really like this scheme. I love the color variations of it. I think it's a really good looking car. I also like they've changed it up for this weekend. Overall, I think it is a really nice looking paint scheme. They've done a really good job on it, and I'm looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack this weekend here at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is BJ McLeod's 2022 Premier Business Investment Scheme that we're seeing this weekend at Phoenix. This paint scheme is alright in my opinion. It's my favorite BJ McLeod or Live Fast Motorsports scheme I've seen so far, but it's an alright paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend here at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeb Burns' 2020 Freshly Laid scheme that we're seeing this weekend at Phoenix, which is also in association with Bob Menery as well. I think this paint scheme is actually really cool. Number one, pretty cool that Bob Menery is getting involved in NASCAR once again, but it's also cool to see, and I do like that the egg on the front of the car. That's one thing I do really like. They did a good job on it, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2020 Phoenix Children IMS Incorporated scheme that we received this weekend at Phoenix. This paint scheme is really cool. I love the fact that they're helping out Phoenix children and stuff. That's one thing really cool, Phoenix Children's Hospital. So that's a big step up in the right direction. I love this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Vargas' 2022 Advanced Masonry and Concrete scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Phoenix. Of course, Advanced Masonry has been associated with Ryan Vargas for many years so far throughout his career. Really cool that they're continuing to work with him. It's a good-looking paint scheme, and looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend here at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Hunter Nemechek's 2022 Stillhouse scheme that we're seeing the Xfinity Series race at Phoenix. I love this paint scheme. Really awesome to see a Stillhouse is coming in here and sponsoring John Hunter Nemechek. It's also cool to see that John Hunter is going to be running the NASCAR Xfinity Series race this weekend. Overall, really exciting news, and I love this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joe Graf Jr.'s 2020 GTE CHN IQ scheme that we're going to see next week at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This paint scheme is alright in my opinion. I'm not overall the biggest fan of it. It's cool to see the new companies coming up, but this paint scheme is not my favorite, but maybe we'll see him have a good run with this paint scheme this weekend here at Phoenix. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jesse Wuji's 2020 ERA scheme that we're going to see this weekend here at Phoenix. Now, hopefully, Jiggy can qualify into the race because his owner's points are now going to come into play. This paint scheme looks really nice. Such a shame that they've not had a lot of strong runs this season so far. But overall, I think that this is a really nice looking paint scheme. And hopefully, they'll be able to qualify their win. But honestly, my hopes for this team are not really high, to be real with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk to Phoenix purses for this weekend. So, for the Cup Series, the purses, which includes all the charter money and stuff, is going to be $7,039,168. For the Xfinity Series, it is $1,344,059. Good amount of purse money coming out. I know that there's a lot of the reimbursed money that comes in per charter teams and stuff. Overall, though, those are purses for this weekend at Phoenix. I love that they at least are, especially nowadays, especially because back in the day, they used to never really show the purse money after the charter system came in. I think it's really cool to see that they've gone ahead and reimbursed and shown the purse money again, once again. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Daniel's Amigos, as this weekend's race at Phoenix will mark the 2022 kickoff for Daniel's Sports program, Daniel's Amigos. 200 local residents will be getting involved in this, and they will have more details on this. Daniel's Amigos has been something that's been around for quite a bit of time. I think it usually starts around the Phoenix weekend, and I think it's around the West Coast cities or West Coast races, or races around the Mexican area is where they generally like to have these things. It's a really cool initiative. I think you get money from it and stuff if you're involved. So overall, I think this is a very cool stand that he's doing right there. I think it's really awesome, and overall, I'm very happy to see he's getting involved. Really cool, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Coca-Cola. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Coca-Cola got the most exposure from the Daytona 500 broadcast, which was $4.14 million worth of brand value, while Goodyear got the most social brand value with $400,000 and $900,900 per MVP index. In the broadcast chart, $1.45 million came from Monster, $1.01 million came from Mahindra, and $220,000 came from Fastenal. Not a major surprise, Coca-Cola is one of the biggest brands for NASCAR. In fact, it's a premier sponsor of NASCAR, so it's not a major shock and not a major surprise to me that Coca-Cola is the #1 brand. It really is not a major surprise to me. I don't think anyone should be really shocked about that. I know some people are, but honestly, no one should be really shocked about it, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about modern era teams. Now, there's only been twice in the modern era in the last few years where we've seen teams go get 22 wins in 44 races. Joe Gibbs Racing had from 2018 to 2020 scored that many victories in that amount of time. Of course, Mark Truex Jr. and Hamilton, a lot of those wins it came really in 2019. I think the one like 2018 or 2019, they scored like 19 victories. In 2018, they got a couple victories there in 2020 as well. In Hendrick Motorsports, though, 2020-2022 have scored 22 victories in a 44 race span. Now, many of those wins have come from last year, but so far in 2022, at this given moment right now, we have seen Hendrick Motorsports put up a really good start. They've won the line in the last 2 straight races, and Hendrick Motorsports has won 7 of the last 8 Cup Series races, and all those have come from Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson. I think it's really impressive to me the fact that Hendrick Motorsports has won 22 out of 44, same with Joe Gibbs Racing, but they've been the 2 best teams overall in the last couple of years. Pretty crazy, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Austin Turrio. Now, this is a really interesting story, as Austin Turrio is actually going to be running for legislature in Maine. In District 151 in Maine, he'll be running for legislature. Austin Turrio was a former up-and-coming driver who does have a couple Cup Series starts for Reagan Racing. At one point, he was a development driver for Junior Motorsports, and then he became a development driver for Team Penske at one point, before unfortunately being let go after the 2016 season. Austin Turrio is now looking to help the Maine area out. It's a shame he's not able to race. I think Austin Turrio is a driver that deserves a lot more of an opportunity to race than he really got. I think he was a much better driver than people give him credit for. That being said, though, good luck to him in helping out his community. Hopefully, Austin Turrio could do a really good job helping out his community. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Tommy Joe Martins. As Tommy Joe Martins is going to drive the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I believe this will be Tommy Joe Martins' 3rd start of the season. He raced in the first 2 races, that being Daytona and Auto Club. And Tommy Joe did say that he's going to be running quite a few races this season, around 15 to 20 races he's planning to run this season. So he's going to run a lot of races this year, but he's taking more of the role of being an owner instead of being a driver this season. Hopefully Tommy Joe can do really well. That 45 cars look really strong. It's had top 20 pace throughout this year. I think both cars ended up finishing in the top 20, that being Kaz and Ryan Ellis last week. So hopefully Tommy Joe can come in here and do really well. Good luck, Tommy Joe Martins. Hope he can do well this weekend here and next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Justin Carroll. As Justin Carroll was interviewed by KickingTires.net, and he says he'll be making his Truck Series debut at Martinsville Speedway. While the number is manufactured not been announced at this time, the other 2 races he will run are Richmond and Bristol. Now, Justin Carroll actually was supposed to run 3 races last year, but because of COVID pandemic and the ruling and stuff with qualifying, because there was not a full-scale practice of qualifying last year, which it really still isn't, but now the fact that they have it back, he's going to be tempted to qualify for these events. Justin Carroll, I think, made a couple ARCA starts, and I think he's going to be making a majority ARCA starts this year as well. Good luck to Justin Carroll. Hopefully he can do really well this year in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmy Means Racing. As Jimmy Means Racing confirmed to Casey Campbell that they are going to enter at Atlanta Motor Speedway with Harrison Rhodes. Now, Jimmy Means Racing did attempt the first 2 races of the season with Harrison Rhodes, but they have taken off for the last couple weeks due to the fact that they have not been able to race. I think they've actually raced in 1 race. They actually supposed to race Auto Club, but I think they withdrew. So they've not really raced since the opening race of the season, and the reason is because of one, sponsorship funding, and they don't really have the owner points spread out to make it into the show. I think Harrison Rhodes does have some talent. It's just the fact that he hasn't raced much in the last couple of years. It's probably a major factor into their struggles so far this season. Overall, though, I do really hope that they can do really well, and I do hope that they can make it into the show, but honestly, my expectations are not really high for them, but maybe it'll prove me wrong and they'll be able to make their way into the show here next week, excuse me. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Janes. As Chase Janes is going to be making his Truck Series debut at Martinsville later this month for the Ram Brothers Racing organization. Chase Janes, for those who don't know, is a Hit Creek Series national champion and an up-and-coming development driver for motorsports teams currently at the moment. I'm not sure how he's going to do because this car really is not overall the fastest, but I think it's really cool that Chase Janes is getting an opportunity to make his NASCAR debut in the Truck Series. Maybe in the future he'll run some more races for the Rainbows, maybe some of these short tracks, maybe in Martinsville later this year. I think the Truck Series does have 2 races in Martinsville. If I'm not mistaken, I think they may have 1 or 2. I'm not entirely sure, but it's pretty cool that Chase Janes is getting an opportunity to race in the series, and good luck to Chase Janes, and hopefully he can have a good debut here at Martinsville. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Coca-Cola 600 qualifying, as this is reported by Dustin Long that qualifying will be from 7:35 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Saturday, May 28th. This will be the first time that the qualifying for the 600 has been at night since 2019. Now, for the last couple years, qualifying has been at daytime. In 2020, the only qualifying session that happened after the pandemic happened was on a Sunday afternoon for the Cup race because he had those one-day shows back in 2020. And then in 2021, they had this race once again. They had a qualifying once again on the daytime. In the Saturday, they did not have it at night. But it looks like they're returning it back tonight. I think it's a really, really good decision, and NASCAR is making it right here to move back to the night times. I think having it back at nighttime, I think is a really, really good thing. So overall, really, really good news overall, and happy to see that they're moving the Coca-Cola 600 qualifying back to nighttime. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Patrick Gallagher. As Patrick Gallagher is going to be driving a 38 for RSS Racing in 2 weeks at Circuit of the Americas. Patrick Gallagher, for those who don't know, has been competing in IMSA. He actually competed for the 99 team, I think it was for Windward Racing in that series, or Turner Racing, whatever team it was. He competed in the Rolex 24 and has been racing IMSA, and also has made a couple NASCAR Xfinity Series starts as well. That, of course, for BJ Cloud Motorsports, but it's been a couple years since he has raced for BJ Cloud Motorsports. It's been a couple races since he has raced in the series. Patrick does have some talent. He's, like I said, he was very, very competitive in the race this year. And I do think he's got a shot maybe at a top 20 or top 25. I think RSS Racing this year, compared to where they were last year, I think that they're overall a much better team than they used to be. So my expectations for Patrick Gallagher, I think he should ultimately try to at least minimum get a top 25. Just make sure he gets some laps and get some experience. But overall, really, really excited to see that Patrick Gallagher is getting involved. And I hope that he can do really, really well in a couple weeks at COTA. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Taylor Gray. As DJR Racing is actually going to field a car for Taylor Gray this weekend at Phoenix. And I'll be honest here, I'm definitely really, really shocked that they are fielding a car. For those who don't know, Steven Satsa was the hauler driver for DJR Racing, or co-driver for the DJR Racing team when it comes to being a hauler driver. He unfortunately was killed in an accident in Longview, Texas. And there was a lot of up-in-air questions if this team was going to show up. But they are actually going to show up. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Taylor Gray. But for this weekend and this weekend only, I'm going to be solidarily today rooting for Taylor Gray to win for Steven Satsa. I think a lot of people would like that. I think it would not only be a popular victory in NASCAR, but I think it would also be a popular victory in ARCA, and I think it would be a very emotional victory for the team. And I do think they've got a really good shot to go out there and win. So overall, really cool to see, at least for sure, that Taylor Gray is going to enter. I'm definitely shocked to enter, but I think it's really, really good, and definitely happy to see that they are going to be, once again, showing up and doing that. So overall, very, very exciting news, and happy to see that Taylor Gray is going to be showing up here at Phoenix. I'm definitely kind of shocked about that, but good to see that they're showing up at Phoenix. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Zane Smith DQ. Now, we talked about this on the channel on Wednesday, about that Zane Smith's team, Farmer Motorsports, was going to attempt to appeal the disqualification due to London as well. The NASCAR appointed panel denies the disqualification appeal for Farmer Motorsports and driver Zane Smith. DQ for threatening Owen Lundnuts that did not conform to specifications. DQ stands, no more appeals allowed since it's DQ. Now, this has caused a little bit of controversy with multiple drivers. We've actually seen multiple drivers and team owners come out and talk about this. Sam Hunt, who is the owner of Sam Hunt Racing, started bringing out images of the law nuts and stuff. And also we saw Tommy Joe weigh in as well. And apparently NASCAR this year has changed the rules when it comes to law nuts, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can't really mess with law nuts, but NASCAR apparently has been giving these teams bad sets of law nuts, and these teams have to sort through them. And that's an issue on NASCAR's part that they kind of screwed up. Is again, it's really, if this is the case, this really is not on the team of Front Row Motorsports. But again, rules are rules, and you do have to follow them. I understand that the team is going to want to appeal, and I think they do have every right to appeal. But at the same time, they're not. Again, they were probably not going to win the appeal anyways. It's definitely crazy that they've already were able to get it appealed as quick as possible. But overall, in my opinion, I think, again, I'm not sure how good of a call it is or not, but it's at least they're keeping consistent. But in my opinion, I do think the appeal, they should have been able to be okay with that appeal. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about J.R. Holderman. As expected, J.R. Holderman is going to drive the 11 for AJ Foyt Racing for all the oval races, including the Indianapolis 500. J.R. Holderman has technically competed or tried to compete in the last 12 Indianapolis 500 since the 2011 Indy 500, where he was on the verge of winning in his first ever Indianapolis 500 for crashing on the front stretch of the last lap, and that's his biggest moment that is known. Unfortunately, not in a good way, but his best known moment. J.R. Holderman has been racing IndyCar for many, many years. Of course, he's not returning to Dry Rumble this season, as this year he was, of course, been a driver of Dry Rumble for many, many years in that team. He's now going to be looking to try to compete here with AJ Foyt and trying to make it in. We all know that Danica Patrick, she is going to be driving in all the road course races this year, but she does not have the clearance to run all the oval races unless she has, because she has to do oval testing, so she's doing all the road course races. I think JR has a really good shot to making it into the show. They've got a good lineup this year. I think Don Kell has absolutely improved in the last couple of years. I think Kyle Kirkwood's one of the generational talent who I think eventually will go to Formula One with the Andretti Global organization. And now you've got Jared Hildebrand who's turning on the ovals. Good to see that they're showing up, and I think Jared Hildebrand is going to show up and do very, very well. So overall, very happy to see this, and good luck to Jared Hildebrand. He will be racing in the Indianapolis 500 with also Rocket on the car. He'll be racing in the Indianapolis 500 with AJ Foyt Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Throwback Race. As expected, the numbers will not be moved to the center for the Throwback Race at Darlington. Now, we've already had a couple Throwback Paints teams that have been revealed, both of them being for Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher is running the 17, an old version of Matt Kenseth, basically Matt Kenseth Throwback, and Brad Keselowski is running a Mark Martin Throwback. And now there was a big question if they're going to allow the numbers be in the center. But just for once again, just like every other week, the numbers will not be moved to the center. I honestly wish they were able to move the center just for this weekend, but I have seen people basically say that it's going to look really, really bad with the next-gen cars, and I understand at the same time. But I do really, really want to have, like, this weekend specifically for the Throwback Race to let the numbers be moved to the center just as like a throwback, or let teams choose where they want to move it just for this weekend. I think teams should have been allowed that grace, but apparently the team owners were basically the ones that got involved with that, and it really wasn't. Basically, team owners were the ones that decided the decision, and it wasn't like NASCAR. The team owners were the ones that overall made the decision and decided that was the decision. Again, I don't 100% agree. I understand what they're doing here, but at the same time, I don't 100% agree. It's an NASCAR decision, though, and they're allowed to make that call. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Danica Patrick. Now, Danica Patrick had to sit down with Dustin Albino, and she was asked about her broadcasting, how she's bringing the induced stuff to broadcasting and talking about IndyCar stuff. And she was asked a question about if she would consider returning to the wheel and getting behind the wheel. And she said during that interview that she says she is not coming back. She did say never, but she did say that she has no desire currently to race in IndyCar, in NASCAR, IndyCar, motorsports at the moment. This does not come as a major shock to me. I know there's been a lot of drivers over the last couple years, especially who have not thrown out the possibility of coming back. And you look at NASCAR and even IndyCar as well. We've seen drivers return, like Jimmy Johnson is going over to IndyCar, and there's been talk maybe in the future he can come back to NASCAR. You've got other drivers and like Carl Edwards has been able to talk about him, and Danica Patrick and all these older veterans maybe coming back. You've got, of course, Gray Biffle, who's made a return to NASCAR. I think overall that it would be awesome for her to come back. But let's be honest with ourselves. Danica Patrick is going to struggle. Danica Patrick was not good in NASCAR, and I'll blame her a little bit for rushing herself up. She should have been, what they should have done with her is they should have kept her junior motorsports in 2013. They should have kept her for another year. And I think she could have won a race in 2013. She was starting to get really, really good in 2012 and was starting to get really, really consistent. The issue with Danica is she wanted the fame and she rushed up way too freaking quickly. And there was no reason for her to rush up as quick as she did. I understand that she wants to make it to the big leagues. I totally respect that and get that. But at the same time, it would have been really, really important for her to get a little more experience than just jump up and use. I think that would have been a better decision for overall. But it is what it is. Again, it'd be nice to see her come back at least for maybe a one race. But honestly, she's doing what she's doing, and she's got a sensible podcast, and I expect that. So we're probably not going to see Danica Patrick behind the wheel anymore, which is fine with me. Honestly, if she wants to not race anymore, that's her choice, and she decides what she gets to do with her career. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about some promotions from the higher-ups. Now, there were some major promotion announcements that were made yesterday morning. So, Steve O'Donnell has been named the COO of NASCAR, which is Chief Operating Officer of NASCAR. And Ben Kenny has been named the Senior Vice President of Racing Development and Strategy. Let's talk about both of these guys. First, Ben Kenny, I want to give him a respect. That guy absolutely deserves the promotion. That guy has worked so hard. He's made a lot of initiatives and a lot of great moves in our sport. He absolutely deserves promotion. That guy's one of the people that's really behind the Los Angeles Coliseum idea and ended up working out. He's been behind a lot of ideas that have been happening in NASCAR, and a lot of those ideas have panned out. And I think especially when it comes to scheduling, he's done a really good job when it comes to he's behind the scheduling and stuff, which we'll get into that later in this episode. But overall, I think that he absolutely deserves the promotion. Steve O'Donnell, though, being a promoted Chief Operating Officer of NASCAR. Now, I have my own personal opinions on Steve O'Donnell. I really am not a big fan of Steve O'Donnell. I don't hate Steve O'Donnell, but Steve O'Donnell has really not done a great job. Really only until recently he had done a bad job as running. He made a lot, was of course part of the Brian France regime. So you really are very, very questionable in people that were part of that Brian France regime. And honestly, I don't trust a guy like Steve O'Donnell to run the sport and being a Chief Operating Officer. I mean, Ben Kenny probably should be the one to be the Chief Operating Officer. But I think it's at least, I mean, it's not a major surprise that they're getting promotions. But in my opinion, I agree. Ben Kenny getting a promotion. I'm not a big fan of Steve O'Donnell getting a promotion because he's still higher up than Ben Kenny's. But overall, it's definitely interesting they've gone ahead and given some promotions to both of those individuals. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the practice format for this weekend. Well, last week NASCAR decided to change up practice where they basically, for at least only last week in Vegas, they gave the teams more practice time with one practice session that was for 35 minutes. And it worked out very, very well, but they kept the groups. Well, it looks like the practice format is going back to the way it used to be. But there is a little more time instead of originally. So instead of usual 15 minutes they gave for the two groups, they're actually giving the teams 20 minutes of practice sessions, so they're giving the teams an extra 5 minutes. It's better than nothing, I guess. I personally think this is how the format should work. I think practice should be around 1 hour. I think it should be a 1 hour practice session or 45-minute practice session, happy hour session. So we don't need 2 to 3 hours of practice. But I think that this should be a 45-minute session. Then you should have one round of qualifying, or if you want to do 2 rounds, then take the top 10 to go to the next round, or just do it the way Xfinity Series does it, where they go that way. I think the way they have practice can be a little bit confusing. I'm not a fan of the groups in qualifying either. I think the easiest thing that they can do is have 1 round of qualifying. I get why they're doing the knockout format. It's not a bad thing. But honestly, I think that the way they have the format for qualifying, it should be 1 single lap. And then if you want to do 2 rounds, then take top 10 from there. Don't do 2 groups because you're going to have people that are faster than guys that make it to the next round. So it's very, very frustrating the way they do it. Again, I don't completely agree with the way they do it. I think that's something that they can change up. But again, is NASCAR probably going to change it up? Let's be real. I really don't trust NASCAR when it comes to that. So overall, I don't 100% agree decision, but it is NASCAR's call if they want to do that, and it is what it is. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Reagan. As David Reagan is going to drive the 15 for Rick Ware Racing next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. David Reagan has said that he would like to have race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but he had to get clearance, but it looks like he got clearance to race in the 15 car. Now, David Reagan is supposed to make quite a few starts here with Rick Ware Racing. He's expecting, I think, to make a short track start or 2, so he's supposed to make a couple starts here, but he did say after Daytona 500 he was going to be evaluating his schedule to kind of see where he's at if he wants to continue racing, because, of course, he is one of the drivers who does a lot of testing for Ford when they do those tire tests for Ford and stuff, he has to be there. And of course, he's still working with other organizations to help them out there. And also his broadcasting role that he currently works with Fox right now. I think David Reagan honestly could have a very, very strong run. Atlanta Motor Speedway is going to be like a super speedway-esque race. And we know how good of a super speedway racer David Reagan is. And I think he almost finished in the top 10 in the 500, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that David Reagan is going to have a very strong shot to be pretty competitive. I think the Rick Ware cars have looked faster. Cody Ware's running top 30, which was not normal last year, so it looks like Rick Ware Racing is overall a much better team. And I think that if you give a good driver in the 15 car, that's no disrespect to Garrett Smedley, but I don't think Garrett Smedley is overall the best driver. I think they can do really, really well. So overall, I'm very, very excited to see David Reagan's getting in. I think David Reagan could have a shot for a top 20 because I think it's going to race like a super speedway. I could see some surprising drivers contending in that. I'm not sure how it's going to go down, but I think it's really, really cool to see that David Reagan is going to be back with Rick Ware Racing. I think he's going to do really, really solid, and I think he's going to do really, really good with the Rick Ware organization here in 2022 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Magnussen. As Kevin Magnussen, and this is a very big shocker, there's been a big talk about who is going to get into the second Haas F1 car. There were 4 people that were finalists for the car. The 4 finalists were Pietro Fittipaldi, Nico Hulkenberg, Oscar Piastri was the third one, and then Antonio Giovinazzi, and then the final one was Kevin Magnussen. And a lot of people did not think it was going to be Kevin Magnussen. Well, we were all proven wrong because Kevin Magnussen is going to be replacing Nikita Mazepin at Haas F1 in 2022. And it is a multi-year deal with Haas F1. This is a major, major shock to me because Kevin Magnussen, he wanted to come back to Formula 1. He said that he would want to be on a competitive team. He did not want to be on a team that was not very good. And let's be honest with ourselves, Haas F1 has not been really, really fast. But he did say that with the new changes and regulations, that he could be there to help and develop the team overall as well. When I look at the drivers that were available, I think he actually was the best choice to go with. Ken Madison, of course, the last year or so, he's been racing with Chip Ganassi Racing and was, I think, also working with Peugeot as well. But he's been working with Chip Ganassi Racing. He's been working with that team and has been able to be very, very competitive in IMSA. And he basically said, he was actually going to run also this year the Le Mans 24 Hours with his father, basically before he decided to make the decision to go over, and basically they released him from all his contracts with Chip Ganassi and Peugeot. I think Kevin Magnussen is a very, very talented driver. He knows what he's doing. He always got the best out of his equipment with the Haas F1 organization. Now, I think that this team hopefully will be a little bit better this year, and I think that they actually are going to be better. And this is not only a great thing for them, but this is great for Mick Schumacher because we're going to be able to see the performance of really if Mick Schumacher was just not, it's just a team or it's just a Mick Schumacher is an overall the greatest. This is going to be a really good benchmark to kind of see where Mick Schumacher is as a driver. And Kevin Magnussen is definitely the perfect driver to go with if you're going to be looking at a way to figure out how good Mick is. And I think that this is a really, really good way to do it. So overall, I'm very, very excited to see that we're going to see Kevin Magnussen. And I think Kevin Magnussen is going to surprise a lot of people this year. I think he's a really, really talented and a really, really gifted driver. And overall, I'm very, very excited and very, very happy to see that he's getting back in Formula 1. I think he's a great pickup for the team. And I really think that Kevin Magnussen is going to do really, really good this season. I'm excited to see what he can do and welcome him back to Formula 1 in 2022 for multiple years. I think he's going to be a good person that can really help develop this organization going forward. So welcome Kevin Magnussen back to Haas F1. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about an all-electric exhibition series. Now, we've talked about this on the channel for the last couple weeks, but there's been a lot of talking points around a potential Haas all-electric exhibition series that could be coming in the near future. And Steve O'Donnell did say during the meetings today, when basically they were having the press conference today, the NASCAR is still looking at an all-electric exhibition series. This does not shock me, and I think as a lot of people look at it saying, oh, this is going to be a series that's going to take over NASCAR. People apparently are not reading between the lines, and anytime this has been reported, people are not really reading between the lines when it comes to an all-electric exhibition series. This does not mean that the Cup Series is going all-electric. Yes, there are going to be electric components on the next engines that are coming here in the next couple years, but NASCAR is not going all-electric, at least on the top 3 series. It's an exhibition series, and one of the biggest things to me is, one, NASCAR has to get with the times. Look at Formula E and look at Extreme E. Those are 2 racing series. Formula E, which is basically Formula 1's counterpart with electric. Same with Extreme E, which is basically like off-roading that's gone into the electric side of things. NASCAR has to get with the time, especially with electric cars starting to be really become much more prominent. NASCAR is going to have to stick with the times. Now, eventually, NASCAR long term is going to go electric, I believe, in maybe like the next 15, 20 years, but we're way down the road from that. And I think that what this also can do is it can bring other manufacturers in that probably weren't going to be able to come in. Maybe bring manufacturers like Nissan in the series. Maybe bring manufacturers like Kia. Maybe even somehow, get this, maybe bring Tesla into NASCAR. I know that'd be really difficult, but Elon Musk probably could work on a deal with NASCAR where Tesla could get in there. It could bring other managers like Peugeot in there, all these other European manufacturers. This could be where you get a ton of your manufacturers if you have a hard time getting a manufacturer in that top series, though I do believe that you are going to see a new manufacturer come in here in the future. That being said, though, I think that this is a really good thing that they are looking at an all-electric exhibition series. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but NASCAR does have to get with the times, and they have to stick with the times. So overall, I think an all-electric exhibition series is going to be overall a much better thing for sport. I know some people will disagree with me on that, but I do think the idea of having all-electric exhibition series, I think, is very important, and I think that we need to have an all-electric exhibition series for the sport to continue long-term and to continue its long-term growth. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Team Sage Racing. Now, Team Sage Racing is going to be making their Cup Series debut at Road America with Tarso Marquez. And there's been a lot of questions around this Team Sage Racing. Now, Team Sage Racing has had multiple interviews with multiple people, including Casey Campbell and RJ Starbuck on the Drivers Meeting podcast. And John Sage, who is the owner of the team, reiterated that they would like to go full-time in the Cup Series in 2023 and would like to eventually expand to a two-car operation in 2024. As expected, they are going to have Ford and Roush Yates engines in their cars, and maybe in the near future, they would like to start some Xfinity Series and Truck Series teams. Now, this team is expected to run in the Truck Series with some, I don't know if it's going to be Tarso Marquez, somebody, but this team is expected to run in the Truck Series at Sonoma Raceway so they can get clearance, I believe, to race, because Tarso Marquez doesn't really have an experience, so he's going to have to run like a Truck Series race in order for this team to run. Now, Team Sage Racing is not a new organization in the motorsports world. They actually have competed in ARCA. They've had drivers like Varvea Default on their team. They've had drivers like Frank Kimmel. I think Oriol Servio is one of the drivers. They've had a plethora of drivers, a Chicago-based team, and they also have competed in the Indianapolis 500 as well. I think it was Motograder or Motograte or something that was basically the team name. They were basically partnering up with Oriol Servia in 2019, and they competed in the Indianapolis 500 and were able to finish in the top 20. So they are not new to the motorsports world. But I think it's really awesome, and they actually did say one of the big reasons they want to jump into NASCAR is because of the next-gen car. And I think that's one big thing, important thing to note, is that they're looking to want to expand in the future. That's a great thing that they're looking at that. Now, the big question is, if they're going to go full-time, are they going to be an open team or a charter team? Because we know that there are not going to be any more expansions of charters, at least for the near future, probably until a new manufacturer comes in. And we're probably not going to get a new manufacturer in NASCAR to probably 2024 or 2025. We're a few years away. If we were going to hear a manufacturer in 2024, we'd probably hear. So it's probably not going to be until around 2025 or around there. We are going to get a new manufacturer. So if he's going to run full-time, they're going to have to look for a charter. And honestly, charters are very difficult to find unless NASCAR somehow decides, hey, we're going to give out more charters and we're going to expand the fields, which, again, the teams are not a big fan of that. But I do love the fact that this team's ambitions. I do like they're also looking to expand. I think that's a really good thing because the more cars count you can have on the field, the better it's going to be. And overall, I am very excited to see what this Team Sage Racing organization can do. I'm really excited to see there's a new team in the NASCAR Cup Series. I know it's only for a part-time basis. I know it's with a driver who was in Formula One many years ago with a minority organization. But I do like that there is a new team coming into NASCAR. I think that's a major positive and a major great thing. And overall, I'm very happy to see the Team Sage Racing is jumping up to the Cup Series in 2022. And they're glad to see that they're looking at jumping in full-time competition in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the LA Coliseum. Now, we're going to talk more about the 2023 schedule here in just a little bit, but there's been a lot of talk about the LA Coliseum for the last couple months, and if that track is going to return in 2023. Ben Kenny reiterated yesterday that he says we're still talking about whether the Busch Clash will return to the Los Angeles Coliseum in 2023. There's still talks and discussions. We're still looking at potentially going there in 2023. Now, they also have said in the past as well that they've been looking to maybe go to other areas for the Busch Light Clash. In my opinion, the Busch Light Clash needs to return to the Los Angeles Coliseum. The Los Angeles Coliseum hosted a Busch Light Clash for the first time in history, and the first time NASCAR has went to a football stadium in a very, very long time. And the event was absolutely killer. It was a fun event to watch. The racing was great. It was just a much different event than we've seen other NASCAR events. And they went outside the box with a lot of things. They invested in stuff. They had face clan. You had a lot of celebrities that were at that race. And a lot of people. And it was a good expansion for the market as well. And the ratings were a massive, massive hit for this event. And I think it absolutely should return. I think that NASCAR, the way that they've thought about things, racing inside a football stadium, that worked out so well in their favor in the historic Los Angeles Coliseum, and it really worked out. Like I said, it really worked out in their favor. And I think it needs to return. One, it's another short track on the schedule. I think short track racing is definitely making a massive, massive, and a much more bigger comeback. And I think that continuing to race on short tracks is going to be a way going forward long term. And I think that if NASCAR wants to continue to have, now hopefully doesn't have major issues with the aero, though the next gen car has been very, very successful with a few issues with that. I think the LA Coliseum needs return in 2023. I think it absolutely does, because I think the racing that we saw was absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible. So I do hope that they return to Los Angeles Coliseum. It was a major, major, and a great market for the sport. And overall, I'm very, very happy that they're continuing to talk about it. I do hope they go there. So I think that if we continue, again, I think the racing was so good. And I think it was, again, I was worried about it, but the racing was so good that they 1,000% need to. And I do hope that they do return to the Los Angeles Coliseum in 2023. I think it would be really, really good for the sport if they return to the Los Angeles Coliseum. We're going to jump onto the first of three major stories of today's episode as we are talking about Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, there have been a lot of questions about, because this race is going to be like a super speed race, if there is going to be a double yellow line rule. Well, Steve O'Donnell reiterated yesterday that Atlanta Motor Speedway is expected to implement the double yellow line rule for the Atlanta Motor Speedway. They're also expected to run the super speedway package that they ran at Daytona and Talladega. That's the package they're expected to run at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This should not shock anybody. I saw a lot of people that are really going after NASCAR and stuff, and I'm like, are you really surprised that they basically decided to make this the rule, considering the fact that it is basically becoming a super speed? They basically changed the banking up to 28 or 29 degrees, which is, I think, 4 or 5 degrees more banking than they initially had in Atlanta before they decided to do the repave and reconfiguration. Now, I will say one thing. I'm not personally the biggest fan of the double yellow line rule. I think a lot of people will basically agree with this too. I think the double yellow line rule is not really prevent safety, and it's only going to confine a lot more space, and it might cause a lot more wrecks. And that's what I'm really worried about this Atlanta race, and that's why I'm not giving this, if this race isn't great, I'm not going to say the next gen car is bad just because Atlanta Motor Speedway was such a different race than any other race we've seen so far. It was besides Daytona as well. I just am not overall the biggest fan, personally, of the double yellow line rule. I think NASCAR has made a lot of bad calls with the double yellow line rule. They've had a lot of times that they made terrible calls. And then, of course, that 2019 fiasco where Denny Hamlin clearly went below the yellow line, and he was ahead before the wreck even basically was happening at the time on the front stretch. He clearly went below the yellow line rule and passed and still won the race. Meanwhile, Matty D gets a penalty for basically forcing someone below the yellow line, even though Matty D was just basically trying to avoid a wreck at one point, and William Byron drove into there, even though William Byron did not intentionally try to wreck himself. He almost basically wrecked himself at the time. But like I mentioned, I personally do not like the double yellow line rule. I think it's had a lot of problems. When you have Dale Jr. calling for the double yellow line rule to go away, you know, one of the best super speed racers who hasn't benefited by that rule, by the way, back in 2003, because he clearly went below the yellow line rule. He was in the process of passing and would have not have won the race, and NASCAR called it right. But anyhow, double yellow line rule, I'm not a big fan of. That being said, though, if it's going to be like a super speedway-esque race, so be it. They're going to run it. Again, I'm just not a fan of the double yellow line rule. I personally think they need to get rid of that rule. I think it's caused a lot more problems than safety. I think it's caused a lot of wrecks. That 2009 situation with Carl Edwards in the fence would have never happened if they would have not made that double yellow line rule a thing. They would not have gone up into the fence. Yes, it probably caused crazier racing, but drivers would be more respectful because you can find these drivers such a smaller space and stuff. You saw the wrecking and stuff, and Carl Edwards really wasn't mad at Brad Keselowski for getting turned up into the catchments. He was not happy as a NASCAR because they decided to have a double yellow line rule, which, again, like I've said many times, I'm not a big fan of the double yellow line rule. I think the rules are gimmicky, and I think there's a lot of problems overall with the double yellow line rule. But overall, I think NASCAR went ahead. And they're making the right call here because of the super speed racing. But again, I'm not a big fan of the double yellow line rule, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2023 schedule. Now, there's been a lot of speculation on when the 2023 schedule is going to get released. Well, Ben Kennedy said yesterday that Ben Kennedy says the 2023 schedule will be likely released sometime later this summer or sometime closer to summer than it's been released the last couple years. For the last couple of years, the schedule has been released around fall. I think usually late September, early October is generally when NASCAR has released the last couple of years of scheduling. But because of the fact that there probably aren't going to be as many schedule changes, that's why they're probably going to release the schedule earlier this year. Ben Kennedy did say that at the Los Angeles Coliseum when the Cup Series was there a little over a month ago, that he did mention that they were probably not going to be as many changes as we see on previous schedules in the past. Now, looking at the 2023 schedule, there are some changes I think that are going to happen. Number one, I think that the LA Coliseum actually will return in 2023. I think that they're going to make that decision right there. The next thing I think is actually going to happen is we've talked about this a couple times with the Chicago Street Course, that there's a lot of questions around the Chicago Street Course if that race is actually going to happen. And I think there's a very strong chance that that race will go through. Yes, there's a lot of issues with talks going on right now. There's probably a lot of politics going around that, because one thing around with street courses, and there's a lot of politics that go around it with racing and stuff a ton of times, and that could be a major, major issue with the 2023 schedule going forward. I also do think that NASCAR will try to maybe diverse their schedule up a little bit again, and maybe they'll try again. They're not going to get North Wilkesboro or National Fairgrounds back by 2023. I know some people were thinking maybe that would happen, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think Trucks has a possibility of going back to North Wilkesboro as early as 2023 or 2024, but if they're going to want to race in 2023, they're going to have to get that track cleaned up. They've done a lot of cleanup on the track, and they've got rendering stuff, and they're looking to try to get a race there maybe next year, but I don't know if there'll be a race next year because there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done. But they are making a ton of progress on North Wilkesboro from the last time I've seen. There's a lot of cleanup that's been happening there and a lot of work that still needs to be done, but it has been getting done out there. I also do think NASCAR is going to maybe try to go international. I think there's a possibility they could. Again, I think that NASCAR could go back up to Canada for the Truck Series at least. I think the biggest reason we didn't have a race in Canada this year is because of what's been going up with the COVID and stuff. But let's be for real, Canada's been basically lifting every restriction that there's been up there for a long time. We're seeing in all countries, all restrictions are being lifted. So overall, in my personal and sincere opinion, when it comes to the 2023 schedule, I want to see some change. I don't think NASCAR is going to make as many changes as we've seen in past years. I like what they did in 2021. 2021, they went balls to the wall when it came to the 2021 schedule. They made so many changes to our 2021 schedule, and I think it put on a much better season. Yes, it wasn't perfect. Still had a lot of those mile-and-a-half races with the package, the 550 package, but I think you saw a much better season. And in 2022, there's some changes, actually quite a few changes, but it's, again, with some of the tracks schedule, but they didn't add a lot of new tracks. But they did make some major changes, especially with the Trucks and Xfinity Series schedules. They made a ton of major changes over there. I am personally want to see some changes. Again, I think that they can do smaller. And again, I would like to maybe a few less road courses on the schedule. Again, I know a lot of people love the road courses. I think that there's too many road courses on the schedule. I think there's 6 right now. I think 5 is where we should be. So drop 1 road course from the schedule and get some more short tracks on the schedule. Drop those intermediate tracks, and then we'll be good to go. So overall, 2023 schedule expected this early summer or sometime later this summer. We'll see what comes out of it, but there might be some changes coming to schedule that we might see in the foreseeable future. Keep an eye. I think there might be some major changes coming to the 2023 schedule in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're now talking about Alex Bowman and Kyle Busch. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, Alex Bowman picked up his first victory of the season. Well, Kyle Busch was 3 laps for winning the race before the caution came out for Eric Jones, where he got into the outside wall and unfortunately collected the Bubba Wallace, who nearly hit the pace car on pit road, which really wasn't Bubba Wallace's fault. It's NASCAR's fault for not throwing the caution. On the late restart, Alex Bowman got 2 tires. He decided to take 2 tires at the end of with his other 2 teammates, being Kyle Larson and William Byron. They all took 2 tires. Kyle Busch took 4 tires. Kyle Busch does not win the race, and Kyle Busch was not very happy on the radio of Bay City. Every time he backs into all these wins, there was a lot of expletive F words, expletives they basically said in this radio conversation. He said, God dang it. And Kyle Busch, I kind of thought at the time he was being a little bit harsh. Well, Alex Bowman went on Sirius XM NASCAR radio on Monday, I think it was Wednesday night afternoon. And he says that on Series 7 that he talked to Kyle Busch Monday night, and Bowman says that Busch told him he was just mad at losing and didn't intend to be disrespectful to him. He apologized to him. And it seems like they're both on good terms as well, due to the fact they literally were selling t-shirts against each other. I mean, Alex Bowman was selling basically anytime $18 basically said all luck, no skill. Then Kyle Busch basically gestured back, putting 48% off on all t-shirt sales from there. Again, I think that Kyle Busch, we all know kind of Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is very close to winning. I understand Kyle Busch's frustration, and he basically did not mean to be disrespectful. He apologized to him and said he did not mean to be disrespectful to him in that situation. And again, I think that it's a good thing that Kyle Busch did apologize. I think Kyle Busch just mad at the heat of the moment. And let's be honest, we all know Kyle Busch is kind of a sore loser. Kyle Busch hates losing. And Kyle Busch, over the last couple of years, has not won a ton of races. He's only won 3 races in the last 2 years. In fact, in the last, I think, like 69 or 70 races that have taken place, or how many races that have taken place? Like 70, out of the last 75 races have taken place. Kyle Busch has only scored 3 victories in the last 75 races. And I think Kyle Busch finally feels like, hey, I'm going to finally win a race here and get my first win of the season and lock my way into the playoffs in the 3rd race of the season. And then that, unfortunately, happens where a caution comes out. And credit to Alex Bowman as well there. Alex Bowman's team made a good strategy call. And let's be for real for Kyle here. And I said no respect to Kyle. But Kyle Busch's team could have easily also taken 2 tires. They could have been up front. And they probably, again, I think some teams would have opted to stay out maybe as well. But I think Kyle Busch could have easily taken 2 tires. And he probably still would have won the race because he had probably the fastest car at the end of the race, because again, it was not as easy, not as difficult to pass, but it's also not easy to pass. If Kyle Busch got the lead, he was going to win. But once all those Hendrick cars got up front, you knew it was going to be very difficult to pass, considering they were going wide open at the end of the race. That being said, though, looking at the situation, again, we've seen a lot of things where NASCAR, we've seen a lot of drivers just get mad at heat moment. We saw Ryan Blaney, he got really, really pissed off at heat moment, basically, he said, I'm going to effing kill that kid, basically at Austin Center. And Ryan Blaney basically wasn't happy about it for a little bit, but he eventually calmed up to him, basically said that he was all right. Then Fox tried to play it up. Same with the Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson situation, but we've seen drivers getting mad every single week. Now, my big question is Fox going to try to make a skid out of it? Because Fox, with the Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson situation, they tried to make a skid out of that situation. Are they going to? That's a big question I have, and it will probably be really, really stupid and really, really cringe. This is why Fox needs to change the people that are working there, and they need to get their stuff together. But anyway, when I look at the situation, Alex Bowman was not in. Again, Kyle Busch is just frustrated. And I know a lot of people are going to say Alex Bowman lucks in a lot of these wins. And yes, he got lucky with the caution. He wouldn't have won this race without a yellow. But Alex Bowman had to beat Kyle Larson straight up at the end of the race. Kyle Larson, in my opinion, is the best driver in the Cup Series right now. So when you beat Kyle Larson straight up, I know they're teammates and stuff, so they're going to have a lot of respect for each other. But if you beat your teammates straight up, I think that's overall really, really impressive. So overall, in my opinion, it's good to see a Kyle Busch apologize to Alex Bowman, and it looks like they're on good terms. So anyway, that is today's long NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link schedule below over that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Kyle Busch apologizing to Alex Bowman? Let me know in the comments below. And what changes do you think are coming to the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series schedule? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we've got the NASCAR Xfinity Series race video that's going to be dropping sometime in the after the race is over. And then Sunday, we've got 2 videos dropping where we'll have the starting lineup from Phoenix release, and then we will also be doing the race review from Phoenix as well. So that'll be on the channel later this weekend. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.